Before you decide this message isn't about you, let me ask you something. What if the distance, the inconsistency, the moments of unexplained hesitation you've noticed in your person over these past months haven't been about a lack of feeling at all, but about something they've been carrying privately, something significant enough that they haven't yet found the courage or the right moment to finally say it out loud? What if the pressure of holding this secret has been quietly building for so long that it has genuinely reached the point where continuing to hold it has become harder than the fear of finally letting it out? Most people assume that when someone is withholding something significant, it means they simply don't trust the relationship enough to be honest. But secrets, particularly ones carried for months rather than days or weeks, are rarely that simple. They are usually protected by genuine fear, fear of how the truth will be received, fear of what it might change, fear of disappointing or hurting someone whose opinion matters deeply, and that fear, however understandable, tends to have a specific psychological shelf life. It does not remain sustainable indefinitely. Right now, if your person has seemed distracted, inconsistent, or emotionally unavailable in ways that feel disconnected from anything obviously happening between you, this pattern may reflect exactly this kind of internal pressure, something significant being carried privately, weighing on them in ways that inevitably affect how present and consistent they are able to be within the relationship. This message isn't promising that today, this exact day, is a guaranteed, literal deadline for this particular secret to surface. What it offers instead is a genuine, grounded understanding of why secrets carried this long tend to reach a breaking point, the recognizable signs that this breaking point is approaching, and how to meet that moment wisely when it eventually arrives, whether that happens today, this week, or slightly further down the road. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to hear may completely change the way you understand secrecy, timing, and the internal pressure that eventually brings even the most carefully guarded truth into the open. Have you noticed a specific kind of tension in your person recently? Moments where they seem to almost say something before stopping themselves, or an unusual restlessness that doesn't match anything you're aware of happening in their outer circumstances? Understanding why your person may be carrying something significant privately requires understanding the genuine psychological function that secrecy tends to serve, function that is rarely about deception for its own sake, and far more often about self-protection against a specific, anticipated fear. Many significant secrets are protected by fear of how the truth will change the other person's perception of them. A person carrying a secret about a past mistake, an unresolved feeling, a significant personal struggle, or an unmade decision often fears that revealing this information will fundamentally alter how they're seen, potentially damaging trust, respect, or affection that currently feel secure. This fear, even when it doesn't accurately predict how the information will actually be received, can feel genuinely overwhelming enough to justify continued silence, sometimes for a considerably longer period than the person ever originally intended. Other secrets are protected by fear of consequence rather than fear of judgment specifically, concern about how revealing certain information might practically change the relationship, its trajectory, its stability, or its future, rather than concern purely about how the person will be personally perceived. This kind of secret often involves significant decisions, career changes, family circumstances, unresolved feelings about the relationship's future, that the person fears will create genuine disruption once revealed. Some secrets are protected simply by uncertainty about how or when to bring up genuinely difficult information. A person who intends to share something significant, but who struggles to find what feels like the right moment, repeatedly postponing the conversation as the accumulated weight of continued postponement makes the eventual conversation feel increasingly significant and difficult to initiate. Regardless of the specific content being withheld, prolonged secrecy tends to produce a consistent psychological experience, increasing internal tension, a growing gap between the private inner world and the outer, relational presentation, and mounting discomfort that generally intensifies the longer the secret continues being held. This internal tension is often what produces the visible signs of distance, distraction, or inconsistency that partners frequently notice without understanding their actual underlying cause. Understanding why secrets carried for extended periods tend to eventually surface, rather than remaining hidden indefinitely, offers meaningful insight into what your person may currently be experiencing, and why the pressure they're likely carrying tends to have a genuine limit. Maintaining significant secrecy requires ongoing psychological effort, continuous management of what can and cannot be said, careful navigation around certain topics, and sustained internal vigilance to prevent accidental disclosure. This effort, while often largely unconscious or automatic once established as a pattern, is genuinely tiring to sustain over an extended period. Many people report that maintaining a significant secret becomes progressively more exhausting over time, not because the secret itself changes, but because the cumulative effort of continued concealment steadily accumulates. There is also a well-documented psychological phenomenon where withheld, emotionally significant information tends to become increasingly intrusive the longer it remains unexpressed, surfacing more frequently in a person's thoughts, becoming harder to suppress during conversations that touch even peripherally on related topics, and generally demanding increasing conscious effort to keep contained. This intrusive quality often intensifies specifically as external circumstances create pressure toward disclosure, an approaching event, a direct question that comes close to the truth, or simply accumulated exhaustion finally exceeding the person's capacity for continued concealment. Additionally, many people who carry significant secrets experience growing guilt or discomfort specifically related to the ongoing deception itself, separate from whatever discomfort originally motivated the secrecy. This secondary layer of guilt about withholding rather than guilt about the original content being withheld, often becomes a significant, independent factor pushing toward eventual disclosure, sometimes becoming even more psychologically significant than the original fear that motivated the initial secrecy. This combination of factors, accumulated exhaustion, increasing intrusiveness of withheld material, and growing guilt about ongoing concealment, tends to produce what might be described as a genuine psychological pressure point, a point where continued secrecy becomes more uncomfortable than the anticipated discomfort of finally disclosing the truth. Once this threshold is reached, disclosure often occurs relatively quickly, sometimes triggered by a seemingly minor event or conversation that simply provides the final opening the person has been unconsciously waiting for. There are specific, recognizable signs that often indicate someone is approaching this kind of breaking point, worth paying attention to as potential evidence that disclosure may indeed be relatively close, even if an exact date or moment cannot be reliably predicted. Increased restlessness or visible tension during conversations that come close to, without directly addressing, the actual content of the secret is a common sign. Moments where your person seems to hesitate, change the subject abruptly, or display physical signs of discomfort, increased fidgeting, avoided eye contact, unusual pauses, when certain topics arise that appear tangentially connected to whatever they're withholding. A pattern of seeming almost ready to say something significant, starting a sentence with unusual seriousness before stopping themselves or redirecting, often indicates that the pressure toward disclosure has become significant enough to produce visible, near attempts at expression, even while the person has not yet fully committed to following through. If you've noticed this pattern occurring with increasing frequency, this often indicates genuine, approaching disclosure rather than a pattern likely to continue indefinitely without resolution. Increased overall emotional intensity or volatility, seemingly disconnected from anything specifically happening in the relationship's day-to-day circumstances, can also indicate approaching disclosure, the accumulated internal pressure of continued secrecy manifesting as generally heightened emotional reactivity, even in situations unrelated to the secret's actual content. Direct or indirect statements about needing to talk about something significant, or feeling like there's something they've been meaning to bring up, represent perhaps the clearest sign of approaching disclosure, particularly when these statements begin occurring with increasing frequency or directness over a relatively short period of time. If you're noticing several of these signs together, increased tension around certain topics, near attempts at disclosure that get interrupted, heightened general emotional intensity, and increasingly direct references to needing an important conversation, these represent genuine, converging evidence that your person may indeed be approaching a significant breaking point, even though the exact timing of eventual disclosure remains impossible to predict with complete certainty. The way you respond during this period of approaching disclosure can significantly influence whether your person feels genuinely safe enough to share what they've been carrying, or whether continued pressure or anxiety inadvertently pushes disclosure further away rather than closer. Avoiding direct interrogation or repeated, pointed questioning about what specifically they might be hiding tends to be significantly more effective than it might initially seem. Direct interrogation often increases a person's defensive anxiety, making disclosure feel more like being caught rather than genuinely choosing to share, a dynamic that tends to reinforce continued concealment rather than supporting genuine, voluntary openness. Creating consistent, low-pressure opportunities for open conversation, without specifically demanding disclosure of the particular secret you suspect exists, tends to be considerably more supportive. This might involve simply maintaining regular, genuine check-ins about how they're feeling more broadly, communicating clearly that you're available and receptive to whatever they might need to share, without making that availability contingent on them actually disclosing something specific. Directly communicating your own emotional safety and capacity to handle difficult information, reassuring them, when appropriate and genuine, that you value honesty over comfortable silence, and that you're capable of handling difficult truths without the relationship necessarily ending as a result, can meaningfully reduce the fear that often drives continued concealment. This reassurance is most effective when it feels genuinely authentic rather than performed, and when it doesn't come across as pressure specifically designed to extract a particular disclosure. Maintaining your own emotional stability and continued engagement in your own life during this period protects you from the exhaustion of anxiously monitoring for signs of impending disclosure, while also, somewhat paradoxically, often creating exactly the kind of secure, non-anxious environment that tends to support someone finally feeling safe enough to share difficult truth. When your person does eventually share whatever they've been carrying, your response in that specific moment significantly influences both the immediate outcome of that conversation and the longer-term trajectory of trust and openness within the relationship. Responding with genuine presence and patience, rather than immediate, intense reaction, tends to support the most productive outcome, even when the content of what's being shared is genuinely difficult or significant. Taking a moment to fully absorb what's being shared before responding, rather than reacting immediately from initial shock or emotion, often produces a considerably more thoughtful, constructive response than an immediate, unprocessed reaction would allow. Asking genuine, open questions to fully understand their experience and perspective, rather than immediately moving to judgment or conclusion, tends to produce a more complete, accurate understanding of the situation, one that supports better decision-making about how to move forward together, regardless of what that path forward ultimately looks like. Giving yourself genuine permission to need time and space to process your own response, rather than feeling pressured to immediately resolve every aspect of the situation within the initial disclosure conversation itself, is equally important. Significant disclosures often require ongoing conversation and processing over subsequent days, rather than complete resolution within a single, initial exchange. While much of this message is focused on understanding and supporting your person through this process of approaching disclosure, it's worth turning attention toward your own emotional preparation as well, since receiving significant, previously withheld information well requires genuine internal readiness on your part too. It's worth honestly considering, in advance, how you might respond to various possible categories of significant disclosure, without knowing the specific content, but reflecting generally on your own values, bounds, and capacity for handling difficult truth within this relationship. This kind of advanced reflection, while necessarily general given the unknown specific content, can help you approach the eventual disclosure with somewhat greater emotional readiness than encountering it entirely unprepared. Maintaining your own support system, trusted friends, family, or a therapist, throughout this period of uncertainty provides valuable emotional resources both for processing the waiting period itself and for processing whatever eventual disclosure ultimately occurs. This support ensures you're not relying exclusively on the relationship itself to process what may prove to be significant, difficult information about that same relationship. It is also worth remembering that your own well-being and emotional security remain important throughout this entire process, regardless of what your person is currently carrying. Continuing to invest in your own life, your own fulfillment, and your own sense of stability, separate from anxious anticipation of this eventual disclosure, ensures that you remain genuinely capable of responding to whatever emerges from a place of groundedness rather than pure anxious anticipation. If your person has seemed distant, inconsistent, or privately burdened in ways that feel disconnected from anything obvious happening between you, understand that this pattern may indeed reflect something significant they've been carrying, something that, given the genuine psychological pressure of sustained secrecy, is likely approaching a natural point of disclosure, even if the exact timing remains impossible to predict with complete precision. Whatever they're carrying, and whenever they finally find the courage to share it, your response in that moment matters significantly, both for the immediate outcome and for the longer-term trust and openness of your connection moving forward. Approach this approaching moment with patience, genuine presence, and honest preparation of your own emotional readiness, rather than either anxious pressure or complete passivity. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. If this message resonated with what you've been sensing in your own relationship, I hope it offered genuine clarity about what your person may be experiencing internally, and grounded guidance for how to meet whatever they're carrying with both wisdom and compassion. This has been the Archetype Awakening. I hope this video helped you understand the genuine psychological pressure behind sustained secrecy, and reminded you that whatever truth is approaching, meeting it with patience and presence serves your relationship far better than either anxious pursuit or complete avoidance. Wishing you patience for whatever your person is preparing to share, wisdom in how you receive it, and the deep, honest connection that becomes possible once whatever has been hidden finally has room to breathe in the open. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next video.